Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
On this episode, we have Avinash Kaushik in talking to us about incrementality, KPIs, traps that misguide marketers, how anybody can suck less, and what marketers need to learn. This is such an amazing show, and I really hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Marc Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
On the show today is Avinash Kaushik. Avinash, thanks so much for joining us. We're just delighted to have you here.
No, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And so, Avinash, you are now the Chief Strategy Officer at Croud, which I'd love to dig into a little bit more later. But it's a full-service marketing agency. I think you're based out of the UK. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're based. We have UK and the US, but the UK is motherland, if you will. So the larger presence
Gotcha.
here.
Well, happy coronation, Avinash.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I've had. As an American, it has been fun to spend the last 3 days here and go to the big lunch and see the coronation in the razzmatazz.
Oh,
yeah, no doubt. And where I originally heard, we were just geeking out, or I was geeking out anyway, on having heard you for so long on Mitch Joel's podcast from the 6 Pixels podcast. You were previously at one of my favorite titles I've ever heard of was the digital evangelist, I think, at Google.
Love that.
Senior global director of strategic analytics at Google, best-selling author of a couple of books at least that I know of on web analytics, author of Occam's Razor and the Marketing Analytics Intersect newsletter, co-founder of Market Motive, which is a digital marketing education platform, and a in-demand keynote speaker for all around the world for a lot of the big brands. Really excited to have you here. You had published several articles and keynotes around incrementality. And so that's what we really wanted to chat with you about today, and measuring incrementality and sort of in the marketing landscape and what that means and all kinds of things around measurement and KPIs. So I'm really excited to have you here. Thanks.
No, thank you, Mark. I'm excited to be here, and Mitch is such a great friend of mine. So it's great to have that connection.
Yeah, fellow Canuck. So maybe let's just start with some of the challenges that you've seen with KPIs, like as a level set. There's so many things you can measure. Yeah, so many things. Everything from likes on organic posts to bounce rate on a website. You name it. There's ROAS and ROI. There's like all kinds of things. So, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that or mistakes that people make when they're measuring or establishing KPIs for marketing?
Yeah, that's really a great foundational question. I think when things go off the rails in terms of analytics, we can almost always tease it back to KPIs. And the reason that KPIs are so important is these two simple things, right? When you set a KPI, it establishes the purpose you're solving for. So if you set conversion rate as a KPI that's solving a particular purpose you want, for example, I can double your conversion rate at 3 times the cost. Right. But if the conversion rate is the incentive, you could see behavior happening. You could set profit as a KPI. It drives a different behavior. So first thing, it's really important is KPIs are important because at the end of the day, they establish purpose. Why are you doing something? And picking the right one can create the right incentives for your company. If you pick the wrong one, you create wrong incentives. So good behavior, bad behavior, even though it's like, what metrics, KPIs? But in the end, what you measure will actually matter. You will send a signal to the company. I think people make sort of two big mistakes when picking KPIs. The first one is a lot of times the things we get enamored by are what I call activity metrics versus outcome metrics. So impressions, visits, page views, all of these things are activity metrics. These are things you are doing. Outcome metrics are conversion rate, revenue, number of leads completed, profit. All of these are related to what you got out of marketing. And if you look at a dashboard for an average CMO, you wouldn't be surprised to see 90% activity and maybe 10% outcomes. And even then, you'll almost never see profit. So one big mistake is this unbalance between activity and outcomes. You want a correct balance. The second one, of course, is we are constantly exploding the kind of things we can do in marketing. There's a new fad of the month every month. And what happens in that case is people end up chasing vanity metrics. They're hardly even activity. They're just vanity metrics. They don't really mean anything, even in the short term. And so for a long time, remember, we were so enamored by likes. Like, what the heck is like? It turns out it's worth nothing. It was worth nothing the first day. It's not worth anything 4 years later. So the second big mistake is picking vanity metrics. But I think that if you get these two things correct, and you make sure that your obsession is around outcome metrics and not activity, and you make sure you weed out all the vanity metrics, it is very much possible they end up creating scorecards with maybe 4 or 5 metrics on which the entire company runs, and that has the right incentives for behavior. So those are some of the things I observed. There's sort of sub-lessons there around making sure you balance between efficiency and effectiveness. So for example, I work at Croud, we're an agency. And so it's not unusual for some of our clients and say, I want more efficiency. Bring me more efficiency. My CPA is $10, make it $8. And that's reasonable. But to ask for efficiency without effectiveness is a mistake. So I can take your cost per acquisition down from $10 to $8 pretty easily by cutting in half the amount of revenue you're getting or cutting the conversions. So what you want to be able to say is, I would like to have the following efficiency band at the following effectiveness. So for example, my current CPA is $10. I'll happily go up to 15. So make it much worse. If you get me 5 points of market share, almost any company would make that trade-off. Get me 5% market share, I'll happily take it, right? Or say, make sure you go from $10 to $9, but don't lose more than 5% of the conversions. Now that's another nice balancing force. Most people who pick KPIs don't have this balance between effectiveness and efficiency. And I call them the BFFs. Always have 2 metrics, one KPI for efficiency, one for effectiveness. And what you'll do is create the right incentives for your organization. So those are some of the things that I sort of obsess about. I made this, one of the newsletters I wrote a year ago is, the 8 rules for making sure you pick the right KPIs. And so what I'll do is I'll share them with you, Mark.
Sure.
And if you're going to send a newsletter or something out with this podcast, you can include that recommendation from me. It'll be a nice bonus for people who are on your newsletter. But that's those rules are a really good way to make sure you're creating the right incentives by picking the right KPIs.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. Yeah.
That would be awesome. The one thing I liked what you said there when you think about the activity metrics and outcome metrics and really kind of striking that right balance. All too often you see organizationally, a lot of people will focus on the metrics that they're either comfortable with or favor the story that they're trying to tell. And in doing so, you're likely missing a big part of the equation or an opportunity. And my quick question here is, where do you see marketers today still kind of primarily focus their attention, especially when they are picking some of the KPIs, which is a miss?
Yeah, so I see lots of marketers falling into the kind of these 2 or 3 clusters. The first one, I think we have to pay homage to your observation that sometimes organizations are just used to something and then they're not willing to sort of change with the times or strategy or new tactics that they're trying. And so it's not unusual. I'll go to a company and say, well, why are you measuring this? Like, this is like not a great KPI. And they're like, well, we measure it for 10 years. And I'm like, well, that's not a good reason. I have this life cycle, I think, in my first book of metrics. And one of the things I share in it is 25% of a KPI should die every year because you need space for new ones. And by the way, that was in my first book. I make it like 40% now. Change is so much faster these days than it would. And if you don't make space for it, you'll get stuck with this thing that was important 5 years ago, but is no longer important. Right? We're going to talk in a moment about incremental sales and cost per incremental sale. We'll talk about it in a few moments. You need space for that KPIs. You need to kill something so you'll get this new cool stuff in. So that's the first one. The second one is I think that, I kind of blame the senior leadership of a company. They end up creating weird incentives. So like marketers very often have this incentive to just do like a whole bunch of brand marketing campaigns where their KPIs are reach and frequency. They have no sense of, well, what did we get out of it? So then I can't really blame the marketers for solving for reach and frequency, basically shouting at everybody, interrupting them. Who gives a rat's ass if we got anything and pissed off a lot of people? Doesn't matter because I got a lot of reach frequency. That's what the KPIs were, right? Or around activity. I think a lot of marketers, if you look at, they say, what is your performance review based on? They'll say it's about shouting at the world. I mean, I say shouting, they don't say shouting, but shouting and interrupting, basically activity metrics. Very few marketers, for example, even have the incentive. They'll do a lot of digital campaigns and they'll dump a lot of traffic on the website, but nobody checks on the bounce rate of the traffic. The bounce rate is a metric. It's not a KPI. It's a metric. But when you look at that and say, we gave Mark a $10 million budget, he drove 17 million people to the site with a 92% bounce rate. And, bounce rate is I came, I puked, I left. Now, should we be promoting Mark? We shouldn't promote Mark. We should fire Mark. Right. But remember, Mark was never incentivized on bringing relevant traffic. Mark was incentivized on bringing traffic. So these are some of the mistakes I see. So I always say for marketers, make sure that you set metrics. If Mark was our growth marketing hacker, let's give him a sexy title.
This guy.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I love this job I have right now.
And we should say Mark has acquisition metrics, behavior metrics, outcome metrics. And what Mark, so for example, we'll say we'll have reach frequency KPI metrics for Mark. We'll have some behavior KPIs, how many people bounced or check out abandonment rate. And then we'll have conversion rate and profit. So in these 6 metrics, right, very simple 6 metrics, Mark has very good incentives to make sure he's bringing relevant traffic to the site. Then he collaborates with the people who run the site and the app to make sure they have a great experience. And then Mark has some incentive to make sure that these people actually convert and win. It just changes the complete paradigm because Mark can't any longer be satisfied that he is happy to just dump a lot of traffic on the site. And I'm not saying Mark is doing that, just hypothetical example.
Well, let's go with this hypothetical sexy position I have as a growth marketer. So one of the things that's fascinating to me, like the KPIs and the incentives, and I think a lot of the frameworks, because you were just talking about acquisition, behavior, and then conversion as sort of 3 buckets of metrics. But there's also this funnel thing that's been around since 1898. And so a lot of companies are familiar with that and really build out both sales and marketing, even probably customer service to some degree, with either the funnel or sort of a loyalty loop kind of version where you go, okay, top of mind is X. Then we have mid funnel, then we have lower funnel, and we're going to build a framework or KPI model based off of a funnel. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So just I'm going to answer the question, but I just hate funnels. I fucking hate funnels.
So
I don't like anybody who likes funnels either. So put that aside. No, it's because when you analyze data,
I kind of knew what I was stepping into there. So
because if I've actually analyzed behavior across multiple countries, multiple industries, the thing you'll find is the funnel doesn't actually exist. It's a convenient way for old marketers from old times to think about how consumers actually behave. But the reality is consumers are almost all in all steps all at the same time, or multiple steps at the same time. This whole idea that people flow linearly is idiotic. There's nothing in the data that suggests that's how people behave. I want to set that aside. So I have a framework I call See, Think, Do, Care. And it's an intent-centric approach to marketing. And you can see that Marc you'll be in multiple clusters of intent all at the same time. And that's how we should think about more sophisticated marketing. Okay, set that aside. Regardless of the framework you use, some marketing we do is solving for bringing people closer to a brand. Other types of marketing we're doing is somebody is looking for a coupon or a sale, and we're trying to close it out. Two different kinds of marketing. So maybe the way to think about your question, Marc, is we've got marketing that pays off over a longer period of time. I've got marketing that pays off over a shorter period of time. So two kinds of marketing.
Right.
What's really important, by the way, I say one, make sure it protects your slice of the pie or slightly grows it. The other one grows the size of the pie. So two different kinds of marketing. Yeah. And you can apply acquisition behavior outcomes across both of them. So let's take the long term, for example. So you're executing a campaign and it's like TV heavy. It's going to all the Canadians east of Toronto. That's where everybody is, I'm told.
Kind of true.
We'll care about the West later. But big TV campaign, and it's to sell our brand of shampoo or electric cars, doesn't really matter. It'll pay off for a long period of time. So your acquisition metrics will be a brand metric like consideration or unaided brand awareness. And the KPI specifically will be the number of people lifted and cost per individual lifted. These are your acquisition KPIs, by the way.
So these are your like efficiency and effectiveness.
Exactly.
Also.
You see the pair there. Then your behavior KPIs will be, of those people we target with these campaigns, how many just engaged with our brands? How many came to our website? How many did our mobile app? How many called our call center? Just general inquiries. Visited TELUS and visited some of our other telcos if you're in the business of selling phones, as an example.
Right.
How many people went to Rogers as a result of I don't know. I'm giving all Canadian examples, but of course applies globally. So that's your behavior KPIs. Did we end up driving some people to Rogers? Did we end up driving people to our mobile app and website? Then the outcome metrics we will measure over a 6-month period, 9-month period. As a result of these brand marketing campaigns we did, how many people incrementally converted? How many more points of market share we got? So you see the acquisition behavior outcome metrics are those, brand tying back to performance over a 6 to 9 month period. That's the trick. If you're a good analyst, you'll be able to do that. Now, let's say we were doing a performance campaign, which is, let's say I work at Samsung, we just launched a new phone in Canada, and we're going to just spam it on every known channel to mankind to just sell like 10 million new Samsung Flip phones. That's what I use. I use a Samsung Z Flip. And we're going to sell them over the next 30 days. Then your acquisition behavior metrics become more compressed. They span like a week or just a month. And all of them will fit inside the duration of a month. So as you think about the funnel, just think that we're going to measure the same 3 clusters. It's just the time over which we will assess impact will change. That's the key mindset to bring.
Yeah. V, I just want to ask one more question before you jump in there. I can see like your brain is just whirling. See,
we're already deviating from our outline.
We're way off track, but we'll get there eventually. But I did, because the timeline component I did want to ask you about, Avinash, because the outcomes you were talking about before, like if you have one dashboard, it's easy to see, let's say a ROAS optimized campaign. Let's say you're an e-com player. It's easy to see activity and outcome in almost near real time, especially if you got a Black Friday kind of event. And so you see activity, outcome, and then you optimize for that. Whereas if you're talking about these longer, like the second one kind of campaign where you're expanding the pie, that might take longer. And so you have a discrepancy in terms of timelines.
Yep.
And so I would imagine there's a tendency, and that's part of the pull towards the short-term campaigns, right?
Yes, exactly. It's the protect my slice of the pie or slightly grow it. That's all the short-term stuff. And because it takes a longer amount of time to see if you grew your size of the pie, it tends to sometimes sit by the wayside. But the thing I say is that if you're a sophisticated marketer or a very smart CMO, you'll know what headroom exists in terms of you being able to steal market share, performance marketing, right? And so you'll say like, okay, we are like 11% of the market. We'll do the short-term campaigns and promotions and all kinds of really sexy, jazzy things. And we'll take 2 more points of market share. You're not going to get 10 points of market share. It's not. You need to do the other type of marketing to do that. So instrumenting the right kind of measurement becomes really important. So for example, in my prior role with my colleagues at Google, we happen to be in the business of both selling Google ads, long conversion cycle B2B, and also selling Pixel phones, shorter conversion cycles B2C. In both of these scenarios, we did brand marketing. So these campaigns would pay off over a long period of time. How do we make sure that our company is doing that valuable investment? We build mixed models that allow us to measure that impact with high confidence. So we're able to go back to our CFO and say, we spent $20 million or whatever the number is, right? We spent $20 million on television and billboards, typically longer term payoff, right? And as we measure it over a duration of 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months, we're able to report causally, the television drove an extra 1.2 million phone sales.
Right.
Now, if you have instrumented that and are able to come back and tell your CFO, we'll come back every 6 months, we'll come back every year, but we've instrumented this very well, then I think you get the breathing room you need to do that type of long-term marketing, measure it, show success. If you don't have a way to measure it with any degree of confidence, then you're just one more idiot asking for money. And then those programs don't tend to be funded, right? So again, I'm not going to talk about how to measure short-term marketing because, again, very well instrumented. Everybody can measure it. But it's really important for this brand marketing, grow the size of our pie type campaigns. They've instrumented testing and experimentation, incrementality, these advanced methodologies. If you do that, it is entirely possible. This is a real example from one of our clients here, not at Google. But this CMO's budget currently is $170 million globally. So it's a big company, big budget, right? And we're able to measure long and short-term impact of marketing that they do. They do that every 6 months using experiments, incrementality, mixed models. We just went to the CMO and asked for $250 million for the next fiscal year. In the UK, the fiscal year just started. Because we have this instrumented, at the end of 20 minutes, the budget went from 170 to 250.
Wow.
It's because we're able to say, with narrow confidence intervals, we're able to show the causal impact of this brand marketing. This is how it's lifting the entire business and benefiting performance marketing. You get the money. Now, if I had gone and said, could I please have another 70 million, they would just tell me to fuck off, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Because everybody's showing up at the CFO asking for more money. So it's really important to instrument these things in your practice.
My goodness. I have so many more questions on just what you just said right now. But I think you touched on something there at the end where you're talking about being able to showcase and really kind of, show the incrementality and whatnot. So I think we should kind of get going back on track here. So it was one of your recent articles on incrementality that actually prompted us to reach out to you. Maybe we just kind of create a level set here quickly, and just start with an overview of what incrementality actually is. So if you don't mind, what does it mean? Why does it matter? And how does it differ from ROI and ROAS?
Right. So incrementality is the answer to this very simple question in context of marketing. What would happen if we fired everybody in marketing? So let's say a company has 10 marketers or 10,000. What would happen to the company's bottom line if everybody got fired tomorrow morning? Very few companies have the answer to that question, but that was the question I was asked when I took my last job at Google. Is the CFO said, what would happen if we spend no money on marketing? Effectively, just say bye-bye to everybody.
Yeah.
And the reality is we have a lot of claimed impact of marketing. What we did not know is the actual impact of marketing. I'll give a very simple example. You go to Google, you spend $10,000, you buy a bunch of keywords. At the end of it, you got 100 conversions, let's say.
Yeah.
What if you had not spent $10,000 on Google paid ads? It turns out you probably would have gotten 70 of those conversions anyway.
Yeah.
30 is the incrementality.
Right.
You claim to drive 100 conversions, but if you had not spent that money, these people were motivated. They were already typing in your name and stuff. They would have come directly. They may have clicked on organic. They may have seen your email. Their friend might have told them. Whatever. They may have used Bing. Basically,
This is V's new favorite search engine,
right?
Bing.
But just because, and by the way, same thing for television, same thing for Bing, same thing for Facebook, same thing for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Currently, marketing is reporting claimed outcomes. Incrementality shows the actual outcomes. Now, remember, why is incrementality so fantastic? It is able to say, you would not have received these 30 conversions without marketing. There's no way. They would have bought our competition. They would have gone somewhere else. They may not have bought any products. But we truly brought these people to our business, and now we have a lifetime of amazing relationship with them. And if we please them and make them happy, lifetime of revenue for our company. So incrementality is important because you can go to your CFO, not your CMO, your CFO, and say, here is the incremental value of marketing. If you fired everybody in marketing, we would have lost 30% of the sales. And by the way, if you have sales, you can calculate cost per sale, you can calculate profit. So you're able to say, what I typically am in the business of doing is saying to the CFO, you get $20 million worth of marketing spend for your company. Over the last 6 months, it added $62 million of profit to the company.
Right.
Now, when you are able to do that, you can ask for as much freaking money as you want.
As you want.
Because you're saying money goes in, money comes out. And by the way, this is not claimed. This is actual success that was driven exclusively by marketing. And so initially, it's a little hard on marketers. They're like, well, I was happy claiming 100. They're only giving me credit for 30. But the thing I tell them is, look on the flip side. You can go to the CFO and actually tell them what would happen if they fired marketing, which is nice, which is very nice. Because the CFO always wants to know what the incremental impact is. Especially, it's crucial in these economic times where all this pressure, budgets are getting cut left, right, and center. But if you're able to tell your CFO, hey, if you cut my budget, this is where you lose. That's like, make sure that you don't get cut instantly. But in most companies, it's sadly not the case. There's no incrementality measurement, which means the first budget to get cut is marketing. It's so sad. It breaks my heart, but I've seen it like hundreds of times. Is that helpful?
Oh yeah, that's incredible, and I love the notion of I guess marketing just claiming I guess the performance in totality. Yeah. And I think that's what's created schisms within organizations, even between marketing. You have the performance marketers.
That's right.
That are claiming a lot of, the ROAS, if you will, from everything that's happened from a brand perspective. But the brand marketers don't have enough data or not looking at the data in the same way that performance marketers are doing it. And then they can't support their budgets. So then you start seeing shifts internally to more of the performance marketing tactics, which is, again, on the flip side, it's actually being very myopic because you're not able to grow that pie, like you said, or expand the pie. So it's one of those things where you can kind of see how organizations, will constantly pivot just based on how they're structured and then how their budgets are actually allocated within the disciplines.
No, 100%. 100%. In fact, I tell people there are 3 kinds of incrementality you should measure. I call it the ladder of awesomeness. So you go, step.
I love that framework.
And the first thing I tell them is the easiest kind of incrementality to measure is performance. Is the example I just gave, which is you're spending $3 million in Facebook.
Yeah.
How many conversions would you lose if you did not spend $3 million? So that's the incrementality of performance advertising on Facebook. The first time you measure it, it will turn out you would have made 98% of the conversions anyway, even if you didn't spend it on Facebook. At that point, the performance marketer sits up and says, fuck, I need to become good friends with my brand marketing friend because they'll create a new audience for me to go after, and then I can show higher incrementality. Suddenly these two guys, women, humans, begin to come together and work together. Because the moment you measure the performance person's incrementality, it turns out to be 2%. They're like, oh my God, I am not doing incrementality. In fact, all I'm doing is capturing the demand created by somebody else.
V is fired next.
So it's that I call that channel silo incrementality. It's like the first baby step you can take. And but as soon as you do it, it does exactly what you said, which is the intended behavior is. We've got brand marketers, we've got performance marketers. We've got Marc, our awesome growth marketing hacker, on the side doing his own business.
We've got it all going on there. Yeah.
Let's all of us sort of come together and understand what the incrementality is across all of our efforts, and then actually figure out how to do truly incremental marketing.
It's funny I think it was when you and I, V, were working together. At one point, Facebook broke one day and was broken for a week. But Facebook at the time we were doing Avinash, it was called Digital Flyer. But all that meant really was we were replacing print flyer with digital advertising. So there was a significant amount of reach that was going on with Facebook specifically. But then we were also playing retargeting ads and things like that.
Yeah.
But when Facebook broke, that broke our reach. So it broke our audience demand generation building side of things. But then all the performance advertising on search and PLAs and all that kind of stuff went haywire.
Nutty. Yeah.
And it was the weirdest thing. We're all sitting there looking at these numbers just starting to like shrink, and it was bizarre. And we were all trying to figure out, why would this be break? We were optimizing for the same thing. Why is this now so poor in its performance? But it was, I think, a big part of what you were just saying.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I think initially when I start measuring incrementality with companies, there's always a shock because you realize you've never measured it, so there's no incentive to solve for it, and so you do these, rote, what used to work in the past, kind of lame marketing. And the first time you measure it, turns out it's like 2%, 3%. So basically 97% of what you're claiming, the company would have got it anyway. So it's a little bit of a cold water shock. But once you kind of get over it, it actually becomes more fun. Because I go to V. V's like an amazing brand marketer. And I was like, V, your job is to do the kind of marketing that adds incremental value to our company. And it just sort of, he can spread his wings out, and he's like, I'm going to try amazing things. I'm going to do experiments. I'm going to really kick ass. And it brings a kind of joy to a marketer that is not just sending 3 emails a freaking week. If you work at Nordstrom, how many freaking shoes do I want to buy? If I'm buying shoes 3 times a week in response to an email, Nordstrom, something is wrong with my mental health. Right. So in the end, it actually, the purpose is not so much measurement. To me, the purpose is it sort of removes these cobwebs from the thinking of marketing teams and CMOs and gets them to do new, amazing, imaginative things that allows them to spread their wings and increase their value to the company. Because there's a direct line of sight between the thing you did and the profit you added. So it's a little cold water at the beginning, but when I work with these big companies, now as a part of my colleagues at Croud, every meeting we go to, I say, we do incrementality-centric marketing. And this just unlocks a whole bunch of new ideas that are just so much more fun.
Yeah.
I love that.
In terms of the types of incrementality, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned cross-silo, cross-stack, marketing portfolio, or some of the ones you've talked about. Just for some context, I know when V and I did work together, we added up the sales that we were claiming from Google and from my end Facebook, and we had more sales when we added up than what actually the sales were. So in part because we're all claiming attribution for this, partly because of the last click models and all that kind of thing. But maybe you can just talk about the different kinds of incrementality.
Yes, of course. So the thing that's happening is in your case, in the past, was everybody uses third-party cookies to claim credit. And so Google would end up saying, I drove 100 conversions. Facebook would say 100. But you only got like 110 at the other end, not 200. And it's because each third-party cookie they might have touched somewhere during the journey, and they're like, it's mine.
That's right.
By the way, neither could be incremental, right? These are just still claimed. It's just a shittier part of claimed with third-party cookies. It's even worse. So when it comes to incrementality, there's like three kinds. The first kind of question you want to answer is, I'm doing a lot of advertising as Hudson's Bay company over a whole bunch of newspapers. What's the incrementality of my newspaper advertising for Hudson's Bay, right? That's channel silo. You're only asking a question in a silo channel. Usually I say that's the first step of ladder of awesomeness because it's easier to do. So for example, if you would like to know how many of your conversions are incremental from your Facebook or Google advertising, measuring incrementality is already baked into Facebook and Google. All you have to do is call your account manager and say, can I run a CLS, conversion lift study? And they will run it for you, and they will send you the results of incrementality. So that's channel silo. The second kind of question is sort of more complex, which is, let's say as Hudson's Bay company, we're buying advertising on Google, we're buying advertising on YouTube, and we're buying advertising on the DV360, display ads, right? Now let's say I'm spending million. Do I need to spend $3 million on all these properties? The answer usually turned out to be no, you only need to spend 1.7. That's cross-stack incrementality, because you're using multiple channels into one bucket, and usually you use experiments to measure success of that. And there's no tools, no automation. You just do experiments that help you understand. So let's say we're buying television ads across premium and cable, or you're buying through the top networks in Canada versus all the streaming services. You want to understand the incrementality of that. You use experimentation to do that.
Right.
And the second step in the ladder of awesomeness is to use experiments or match market tests. The question that your CFO wants to answer is portfolio incrementality, which is if we put all marketing together, our paid media advertising, our email advertising, our SEO, our billboards, our events we're organizing for our customers, put everything into one pot. What is the incrementality of all marketing put together? And this is where you use sophisticated machine learning based mixed modeling solutions to answer the question. So that's called portfolio incrementality. And at the end of it, V will be able to go back to his CMO and say, we actually drove 27% of all sales incrementally, or 5%, God forbid.
Right.
You're probably not going to say 50, 60% because marketing tops out at maybe closer to 20%. That's if you're like Jesus and Krishna combined. 20%, right? So, You'll probably top out at that percent, right? You'll start at 2%, you get to 20, and then you're out. But look, 20% incremental impact on the business is
incredible.
Huge. I mean, it's insane.
It's massive.
Marketing is rarely the largest size of employees in any company. It's never, right?
Yeah.
It's a piece of it.
No.
So for these small piece of the group to drive 20% of the sales is mind-blowingly amazing. So those are the three. So the portfolio incrementality is the last step in the ladder of awesomeness, right? So channel silo, cross-stack, and portfolio. And the last one you'll do using very sophisticated machine learning algorithms. These algorithms are so much better at analyzing insane amounts of data, including Marc, the thing that you said at the very beginning. It's like, I'm doing this brand marketing. It's going to pay off over a long period of time. And it's really hard for me as a human to see the connection between the sale and the brand ad. You know, we bought all the ads inside Rogers Arena, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to tie that back to sale. But these machine learning algorithms are very good at understanding and isolating that impact. So they'll be able to actually tell you overall how many sales were driven by marketing, and then break it down and say, our promotion with TELUS did this, our ads inside Rogers Center did this, our email did this, our Google did this, Instagram. They kind of break it all out really nicely. So that's the ultimate you want to do. Channel silo incrementality, you want to measure every other week. Cross-stack incrementality, you want to measure once a quarter because you'll use it to reallocate budgets. Portfolio incrementality, you want to measure every 6 months or once a year, depending on how much money you spend. So they each serve a very different purpose. But underpinning all of it is, let's do incrementality-centric marketing.
Right.
So one question that I have there, when I think about, marketing portfolio incrementality, where it's like you have $50 million for marketing, it's divided in all these little different, tactics, et cetera. We should all be trying to achieve to get to that point to understand it. Is that where media mix modeling comes in then? Exactly. Or is there other way? Yeah. Okay. I
mean, so it's two ways to think about it. Old style media mix models used statistics and priors and ad stock and all these things that we can sort of throw away. And so the new breed of mix models, they use machine learning algorithms to understand the ground truth, process millions of decision trees, understand the influence of all the channels working with each other, so on and so forth. So if you're using mixed models, you want to use machine learning based that don't have humans hard coding things into it, because the world is far too complicated for us to understand. And these mixed models, the ones that I've used, they use random forest, they use Bayesian belief networks. They're very advanced at doing these things. Mm-hmm. When you do these models, if you spend $50 million, that's a good number, you'll be able to understand portfolio incrementality, and you'll be able to understand causal impact of any channel where you might have spent more than, let's say, $5 million.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you fall under 5 million, in some cases under 3 million, right, then the model is not going to be able to identify impact. It's too small.
Right.
The signal is too weak. So you have two strategies in that case. First thing is you could say, I still love Instagram because my mom is on it, and I'm going to keep doing Instagram.
Right.
Keep spending $300,000 a year on Instagram. And so you can continue what I call faith-based marketing. It's based on your faith. You believe in it. There is no proof of it, but that's okay. You believe in it. Maybe that's good enough. Keep doing it, especially if you have extra money to throw around. Second, you can say, you know what? I don't think I can stand in front of the CFO and defend $300,000 a year for my mom. So I'm going to just delete it. Put $300,000 in one of the places where I am able to show incrementality. And now you have $10.3 million to spend instead of $10 million to spend, whatever the channel is. So you get to make that choice. I normally tell CMOs that roughly 10% of your budget, keep it unaccountable. Just like mess around money. Try crazy stuff. It's just don't do it for the mom on Instagram reasons. That's a shitty reason to do it. But give V $5 million a year out of 50 and say, try crazy stuff. Like push the envelope. And what we do is use channel silo incrementality to measure it, like lower standard.
Yeah.
Because I want every company to focus on creative, try new kinds of marketings. So putting 10% of the budget there is good. The rest of the budget, 90%, we hold accountable through the various incrementality strategies we measured today. And that's make sure the profit keeps coming. But there's 10% free money, just go crazy. Now, if you're one of I worked with a super large Canadian company about 2 years ago. They're in every province. You have heard of them. For them, the budget is so big and their industry is under such big threat that we made the play money 20%. Because they were under such severe threats in terms of the industry and the company that I said, for the next 2 years, take 20% of the marketing budget and do crazy experiments. Otherwise, you're going to go out of business. So again, you dial these things up and down, but I value holding most of the money accountable through advanced measurement. At the same time, I believe in creating this space where marketing can try free things without necessarily worrying about accountability right away.
In a lot of ways, it's like a skunk works almost within the marketing department, right?
Exactly.
One of the things that strikes me, as we're having this conversation, is budget size is large.
Yes.
For most part, there's a lot of companies that are smaller.
Yes.
And I had an example in my past life working at an agency where we did a paired market test with a client. And we set up 3 actually paired markets, and we put budget in one market, no budget in the other market, and then we increased over time to see if there was a size amount of media weight in each market. At the end of the day, we didn't actually show any results that were different between the 2 markets. And I think in retrospect, when I look at the budget, even though we were increasing the budget by month or by quarter, whatever it was. Like it was still a really low weight of media.
Yes.
Like the equivalent of like a 1-page local or an ad in a local paper kind of thing. Like there's no way you could even bought a billboard in the market for the amount of money we're spending. So there's a certain amount of like media weight, I think, that you need to have in any market to be able to do some kind of pair market testing. And so from a small business point of view, are these, let's even mid-sized business, like are these incrementality ideas applicable still, or are you kind of just out of luck?
Yeah. So everybody can suck less. So this one big takeaway: everybody can suck less. Or maybe there's an exciting Canadian way of phrasing that. Forgive my direct American way of
good. Turn down the suck.
Turn down the suck.
Oh, I love that. That should be an anthem.
I think that's from Fubar.
We need that to be an NHL anthem. Experimentation sounds exciting, but if you're like your total marketing budget is $5 million. Or $1 million, I would not advise you to do experiments. It's just wasting money because you're going to take like $30,000, put into experiments, it's going to run for a very long time. At the end of it, you're not going to get good signal. Don't do it. It's just not worth it. So what I recommend to small businesses, very simple. If you're doing last click place reporting in Google Analytics, start using attribution. It's already built in. Data-driven attribution already uses machine learning. And you suck less instantly. It's not, attribution is not incrementality. But look, it was saying all 100 conversions came from Google or Facebook, and now it's saying, actually, we should credit 60 of those conversions to email and organic search, or whatever the answer is, right? So instantly, you're doing something better. So moving from last click to that is really good. Then if you're a medium-sized business, or you're a small business now headed to become a medium-sized business, and let's say you're spending several hundreds of thousands of dollars on Bing in paid search. You can use conversion lift studies. You may not be able to do cross-stack. You're not going to go to portfolio, but you can actually use channel silo incrementality. So if your precious budget and you're spending $1 million of it on Bing, go use CLS. It will make sure that you're doing something far smarter than attribution analysis. right? So what I recommend is that every size of the business, there is some way in which you can keep stepping up and stepping up and stepping up. And what you want to be able to do is use that type of a mindset to keep moving up and to the right. And slowly you'll go from a small business to a medium-sized business. And one day you're going to succeed. You're going to be an even larger business and larger side of business, so on and so forth. And maybe I'll send you a picture with this ladder of awesomeness that actually starts from where a small business and goes all the way up to the largest size business. It shows you the steps. So you can just say, I'm a small business. I'm going to take the first 3 steps and I'll stop because that's where all the value is. And I'm going to stop there. If medium-sized business, take a couple more steps, stop. If a large-sized business, keep going because the signal and the noise can still be separated. But this concept that Marc, you highlighted is this idea of at what point can I cannot separate the signal from the noise. You got to stop before that. Otherwise, you're just wasting money on measurement.
Yeah, thanks for that.
No, that's a really interesting thing because, like, at the end of the day, when you're thinking about, Marc and I kind of share in this idea, like experimentation will only make you a more curious marketer, which in turn will actually make you more effective in the long term of what you do.
Yeah.
When you're struggling to find budget and you're trying to build the case internally, even sometimes if you do have all the right metrics, marketing will still be that budget line item that may not get the love that it deserves. Okay, and that's just the truth of the matter. What I think is interesting, though, is when you're saying like taking that 5%, and again, obviously you have to be careful how big your budget is. Like if it is 50 million and it becomes 5, then that's fine. But there's that point where it doesn't make sense to experiment and making sure that, just go where you find, your leads, you're finding your audiences, you're doing all the right things. And I think we have to make sure that we as marketers are really in tune with what we can actually do with the budget we have in hand. Because we don't want to not drive incrementality because we're doing a whole bunch of testing. Because if that's the case, then you're going to get even less budget.
Exactly.
So I think really, go ahead.
You're absolutely right, V. You're absolutely right. I think that regardless of your size, you want to have a very deep understanding of incrementality. What's the concept? What does it entail? So on and so forth. And then depending on the size of the budget you have, the kind of activities you have, the competitive marketplace you're playing in, some people are like, some places are really hard. Some people are places a little easier. You want to figure out at your level, what's the incremental marketing that you can do. And a part of it, V, is what you emphasized, questioning where our audience is today, where is it going. So I'll give you a very small example. I work on this with the largest companies and the smallest companies. At the moment, if you look at audiences between 14 and 34, that range, right? It turns out almost all of their attention is in channels where the advertising options you have are sub 6 seconds.
Are limited, yeah.
That's all you got. You got 6 seconds to get somebody to pay attention to you. And yet, if you go to most medium and large size companies, they're used to building 30, 60-second TV ads. Nobody's got time for that. So one of the things I recommend is understand these channels, understand how people are what did they do in these channels, what advertising options are in these channels, because it is so difficult for a traditional advertiser today to be successful in TikTok. And the reason it's successful to be on TikTok is not because TikTok doesn't have ads. It's got plenty of ads. It's that you don't know how to deliver creative in less than 6 seconds. Just do not know how to talk like that. And so it's important, V, to your point, to invest in being the kind of marketer that understands how to operate in environments where our attention is going to be, not where attention is today, right?
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of things that if you have an incrementality-centric mindset, you're like, all right, so TV's not going to last as long at the cost that we're used to. You got to go where the audience is. That means upgrading all kinds of capabilities in our organization, not just analytics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point because there are so many channels. There are so many options. We were actually talking with a guy about the transformation of radio advertising. Yes. And even on that space, they were saying there's going to be a pairing now on DTS on your car. So you can actually have a radio ad that would actually end up being visual as well. So even that, like, it doesn't sound that complicated, but it is a different way to advertise. And so understanding that platform and understanding what you can do with it is different than just like your traditional thought about a 30 seconds audio jingle
Exactly.
spot kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so there's all kinds of transformation in the media landscape around content and how people are consuming it and the kinds of channels that are out there. And so,
and you have to be,
it's interesting.
You have to be open-minded. I'll give you my own example of being humbled. I for the last decade and a half or so, I spent more time in digital, being the digital marketing evangelist for Google, transforming all these big companies, blah, 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 blah. And over the last few years, when I was responsible for global strategic analytics, when somebody came to me after year 2 and said, what are the channels that are guaranteed to deliver brand marketing results, like guaranteed? Mm-hmm. And I just finished this very comprehensive analysis for the last 5 years across every channel known to mankind, because we spend that much money. And I said to them, billboards and radio. Mm-hmm. Now, remember my title, okay? My title. Yeah. And I'm like,
digital.
You can't get everybody through those channels. But when you do these 2 channels smart, it is astonishing how effective billboards can be at brand advertising, unaided brand awareness, and how effective radio can be just for certain kinds of audiences. And my first answer out of my mouth was not, hey, let's go buy a lot of ads on Google and Facebook. Mm-hmm. There'll be plenty of money left over to buy ads there, by the way. But it's humbling, right? I'm giving you my own example because I would never have started with that answer. Never. Of course, I have strong opinions, loosely held. I look at data and I change my mind. And I'm like, hey, put the first 5 million on billboards. That's the thing. Yeah. For the purpose that we're solving for, that's the best place to start. By the way, then we'll get to TV, we'll get to magazines, we'll get to Google, we'll get to Bing, we'll get to Facebook.
Yeah.
And I think this being open-minded is very important both ways. Be open-minded about the new channels, but also be open-minded about some of these other channels that have been around and effective for a long time. It's just that we don't think of them as sexy. So I'm pointing a finger of blame to myself. So have strong opinions, loosely held.
I don't know if this is any, what's it called? This makes you feel any better, but I've also recently had this awakening myself where I have been the digital marketer for organizations for the last, 18 years. And now I'm ever since Marc and I started this podcast, I started realizing, oh, Jesus, wait, there's a whole other world here that I'm not attributing success to just because I've been so siloed in my profession. And I'm with you, man. Like radio, it's the shit.
Again, it's as you begin to analyze portfolio level performance, portfolio incrementality, or just portfolio level performance, you begin to realize, oh my God, email is way more valuable than I gave credit for. Oh my God, billboards, like they're working so well. Mm-hmm. And billboards are driving a lot of what is happening on Facebook, so on and so forth. So it's really fun to have the mindset of portfolio and then be open-minded. Just be open-minded.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Speaking of being open-minded, I mean, there's 8 million other questions I could ask you, but I did want to ask you about your background in education. V and I both are going through an MBA right now. It's our last class, and we're so excited to be done this thing. God. But from a point of view on what marketing teams need to learn, and whether it's a particular topic or a philosophy or whatever, what do you think are some of the things that are really important for marketers to understand and invest in, going into the future?
Yeah. The first thing is I'll reiterate is something V said earlier, which is that we figure out some way to experiment in your space. Try new things. If you've never done emails, spend a week doing email marketing. If you've always done emails, spend a week with the person running your YouTube channel. Run YouTube channel, spend time with the guy from TV, so on and so forth. So one of the things is inside a medium or a large size company, marketing is doing 7 or 8 jobs, just one of which is yours. Figure out how to interact more with the other 7 jobs because he'll teach you. And there's so low barrier to entry. These are people inside your company. These initiatives already exist. Just go talk to the person 2 cubicles down from yourself. If you guys have cubicles in Canada, I imagine everybody sitting in pristine landscapes, working with like awesome
in the mountains.
business.
There's rivers running through our cubicles.
For me, Canada is like Jasper and Banff, because I've been there so many times. I feel like every Canadian is sitting with that landscape. Okay. The second one is just figure out how to follow certain people. Sign up for a lot of newsletters and whittle them down to 2 or 3 you listen to all the time, right? So at the moment, like I write a newsletter. I have a free one and a paid one. And the free one has like 60,000 subscribers. And it's just free once a month. And it's a great way for you to get the latest on marketing and analytics. You don't have to go to the paid one. The paid one, all the money is donated to charity, 100%. $200,000 last year. So I started a paid letter as a way to raise money for charity. But Thomas Beckdale, one of my really good friends, I've never met him. He's in Scandinavia. Super sharp media analyst. Sign up for his newsletter. Sign up for the free one. If you like it, you can go for the paid one as well. It's excellent. But like I listen to Thomas very carefully because he just stretches my mind open. And so here's somebody I've just gotten to know through newsletters. So I just think there are so many newsletters. Sign up for 10 or 12, whittle them down to 2 or 3. And once a week, once a month, they'll stretch your mind. So there's a second strategy I recommend. Have access to new knowledge. And newsletter is a great way in our ecosystem to have new knowledge. And the third thing is maybe follow the example of the 2 of you. Take classes. Everybody doesn't have to do an MBA, but Coursera is stuffed with courses. Udemy is stuffed with courses. Anything you want to learn is like $30. Like all of us have $30 to invest in ourselves, right?
Totally.
So the third strategy I recommend is take some formal courses. If you're able to go do an MBA, an evening MBA, do it. It is very... I can't believe the courage and the commitment the 2 of you are displaying by going for an MBA. It's not easy, right? Especially if you have a full-time job and so on and so forth, it's not easy. I did my MBA. That's why I came to America to do an MBA. And it sort of changed the way I think on so many different things. So those are 3 things sort of I recommend. Work with people on other departments inside your company. Cheap, easy, all the time. Contribute to their products, invite them to yours. Second, there are so many marketers writing bleeding edge newsletter like Thomas. Sign up for his newsletter. It's going to change the way you think about media. And then lastly, invest in yourself through some formal courses, whether it's a full commitment to an MBA or you know what, every quarter, finish 2 courses on Coursera. They'll be like a week or each. Boom. You'll be the cleverest person inside your marketing organization very, very soon.
And number 4 is listen to this podcast.
Oh, sorry. Oh, damn it. Listen, subscribe, pay them, etc., etc. Hit subscribe.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the bell icon. Is there a bell icon? Click the bell icon.
Of course, all of it. That's, I love those 3 things, if I'm honest, because I think, especially the last one, for me at least resonates. It's like the investment that you can make in yourself is just by learning. And the opportunity that you can present yourself to stretch your mind and think outside the box and have these epiphanies as you're going around. Like, Marc and I will constantly talk about like, oh my goodness, we may not like a professor or the way the teaching style or the substance of but it is challenging us because now we have to think a little bit differently, right? Because it could be out of our comfort zone, or it is something that maybe we never thought of in the same way. And I think that's where growth happens, is your ability to stretch. And at the end of the day, that's what we owe ourselves and those that pay us.
Exactly. And at the moment, I'm going through a bunch of hiring for Croud, our agency. And one of our mantras is we want to live in the future. Like we want to invent the future of marketing, analytics, all these things. And I'm actively looking for people in interviews who display like an ability to invest in themselves. Like it's explicitly, I seek that out in interviews, because how is Croud going to live in the future if the folks we have in our company are not investing proactively in themselves a couple hours a week, that's fine, right?
It doesn't matter.
To grow themselves. They'll do more fun work here. They'll learn a lot, contribute a lot, but then they'll take lessons to the next job they'll do. And they'll tell their stories that very clearly put you aside. In an interview, you can clearly see a person that has been investing in themselves versus somebody who hasn't. It's just so clear. So at Croud, I actively look for that because my explicit goal is we're going to live in the future as a company.
I love that.
Can you? I'm interested about Croud. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that and your role there and how this is where it fits in your evolution? You know what I mean?
I had the great fortune of spending almost 16 years at Google. First 5 or so building analytics tools like Google Analytics and analytics inside AdWords and so on and so forth. Another 5 sort of building an internal McKinsey-Bain type consulting company that was contributing to the sales team in the US. And then the last sort of 5-ish years, I think 5 years in a job is a good amount of time, then you should move on. So, so after the second 5-year stint, I spent time working on global analytics, putting together strategic analytics across all 3 big continents on the planet, Europe, Asia, and America. And when I was done with that, I'd always worked in large companies, worked for large companies with large companies. And so as I was thinking about what's next, I was sort of very excited about Croud. It's a full service digital agency. Their heritage was in performance marketing, but they have this really interesting Crowdy model where they have the 3,500 Crowdies around the world that on tap allow Croud to scale amazingly well, in addition to the full team that they have here and in the US. And they've expanded since then into social media, into brand marketing, which has, for me, the Crowdy model connected with the trajectory of expanding into the full suite of marketing was very exciting. And the last thing is Lloyds Bank, London, is the PE investor in Croud. So, they're always very tough and deliver results and results and results and ROI. And I like that, it brings discipline. It brings discipline and focus. So for those 3 reasons, I thought it'd be kind of fun as a next challenge, to contribute to an entire company being successful versus a department. So in my chief strategy officer role, I'm responsible for engineering. I'm responsible for client analytics, strategy, and mergers and acquisitions. So it's a really wide role that allows me to contribute to all employees of the company. I usually end up contributing to 1 or 2 divisions in a company. So I was very attracted to that. I'm spending more time in London than I anticipated, and it's nice. I'm enjoying that.
That's incredible.
That's awesome.
So how can people find out more about you?
Just Google Avinash.
Just Google me. I worked there for 16 years.
The newsletter is the best way to stay in touch. I have a free newsletter. Everybody can sign up. That's where I write my most current thinking, new frameworks, analytics, marketing, new problems I face. This last 2 weeks, I've been writing a series on a pragmatic view of AI. There's just so much hype. And so I built this new framework that allows you to understand what the 7 clusters of opportunity are, and inside it, which ones you should do and which ones are hype. Just don't focus on them. So usually I write about stuff like that.
That's awesome.
I'm so grateful to have you here. This has just been such a joy for me and an honor to have you on the show.
This is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much.
And now the post-pod discussion with V and Marc.
Marc.
V.
What time
post-pod.
is it? You think we would have had a handle on this yet?
Down better. 1, 2, 3, go! On 3 or before 3?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Avinash.
Oh man, everything that he talked about today for me is so extremely tangible for any marketer out there today that's looking to do better. Anything.
Yeah.
The KPIs, the understanding of incrementality, the I came, I puked, I left. I absolutely love that.
I love that line.
I wonder if we can use
Suck
that.
less.
Suck less. Yes. I just, we probably could have spent another hour just talking. And I think he touched on really important topics that we as marketers should care about a lot more and be a lot more diligent on and crafting our story internally. And the idea of incrementality, the claim that you have to revenue, be honest about it, man. Like, anyways, where do you want to start first? Because like, there's a lot that he shared that for me, I was just like a sucker for it.
Well, yeah, totally. I mean, for me, I'll start with this. Greg Shelley, from when we were working together, Canadian Tire. I remember in a meeting, he's like, "What about the incrementality?" And it was great because he kept asking the question. And so, Greg, if you're listening, I'll tag you in the post later. But I found the idea of incrementality strange at the time,
right?
And Avinash kind of touched on this. Like, I do think it's really important for us as a marketing community to understand what incrementality means. And so to say incrementality is one thing, but to really understand it and try and figure out a way to measure it is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And so Avinash had a few great examples of ways you can measure it. And some of them, depending on the size of the organization, it got me excited thinking about, being in an organization where you can measure this kind of stuff. Yeah. And it can be more than just, it should be more than just reach or impressions or likes and all. Like, that's not increment. That's not what we're talking about.
No.
But I think there's like a level set on defining what it is that is important for every business. It might mean different things slightly for one company versus another, but it ultimately has to come down to, thinking about what we talked about as a repeating theme with a few of our guests. Like, there's a profit motive and a business outcome that's really important. And there's an efficiency of the media delivery that you want to track. But having that pairing of efficiency and effectiveness towards an incremental business impact is really important.
Yeah, I agree. Even the idea of making it extremely easy for people to follow, like activity metrics versus outcome metrics, using his acquisition behavior outcomes kind of model, I think is just a different way of, and like, don't get me wrong here. When you think about, acquisition KPIs and whatnot, those are, fairly robust. Everyone's doing them today. But it's really kind of thinking like, how do you tell that story? Because and the byproduct, of this becomes like incrementality. And I think that's where we get lost and we stick to a number like a ROAS number. It's like, well, this is our ROAS. It's plus 350%. So just give me more money. Yeah, but you didn't tell me what was the incremental that the dollars I gave you actually was. And he said, at the end of the day, you're like, if you were to get 20%, what did he say? It was
Krishna and Jesus
came together. It's like, it's not a thing. And I think at the end of the day, like as marketers, we have to be a little more humble in saying like what our activity and what our dollars actually do. But that comes back to just taking that one step forward to sucking less. So if you're doing last click attribution today, I don't care what attribution model you want to use, just use one. Use the one that
just not that one.
Just not.
Or
that
if you're
one.
not using any, use the last click. If
Exactly.
you're using last click, use data driven.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the evolutionary step that we have to consistently take as we continue to progress to get to that point where he was talking about the marketing portfolio incrementality. Where it's like advanced data models. It's learning. It's the media mix models on steroids, so to speak, right? And yes, you probably need to be spending a lot of money to even think about going into that realm. But at the same time, I think it just kind of shows like it doesn't stop. The ladder of awesomeness, as you referenced it.
Yeah.
It's like just keep going. There's always something different that you could be doing.
Yeah. Well, V, remember when we were having that conversation with Grace Kite about budgeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I had her flashing in my brain a few times, just thinking about, and I don't know enough about the difference between media mix modeling and econometrics.
Right.
I feel like they're same, but different.
That's a good point.
But you could probably hire people like her or whoever the other equivalents are in North America that do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
To help out a company. Just figure out, like, even once a year as you're approaching budgeting season, to figure out what's working, what's different, what's not, where you should be putting media allocation, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And to Avanish's point, like, I think you've got an opportunity to be very thoughtful about where to put budget, in that, depending on your objective and your goal, like, you need the two buckets. And so that's also a recurring theme with all the different people we've been interviewing. Like, you can't just put all your money into protecting my little slice of pie, because you also need to grow that pie.
Yeah. And I love that he has also highlighted you talked about, how you often to measure, but like the channel style incrementality. So when you're just doing the channel lift studies and, the Facebooks and in the Google, where you're just doing that, you're measuring that every 2 weeks, then cross stack incrementality, you're measuring that every quarter. Then he suggests, a marketing portfolio incrementality. He said every 6 months. I would argue you could probably get away with doing it once a year. Like you said, just kind of showcase, hey, as a marketing department, this is what we did. This is how we contributed to the overall, revenue of the organization. But again, like I just, for me, he just made things extremely, extremely tangible, where we can build easy frameworks, easy for your team to follow, but also easy for you to relate to your CMO, or if you are a CMO, you can ask your team to kind of approach it to you in these three core ideas. And then go ahead.
Yeah. Well, when you're just talking about presenting it in core ideas, like the talking about the dashboards, and so I think he mentioned 6 metrics along those acquisition behavior and outcome idea. But think about how many different KPI dashboards you and I have seen. Like, it's probably a misnomer to say key performance indicator.
Yeah.
Because if you've got 50 metrics you're reporting on, and I've built dashboards like that.
Them.
I mean,
yes,
like, it's probably a pretty good indicator. We don't know what we're looking for.
Exactly. And, he even brought up something like profitability as well. And if you remember some of our earlier conversations, like, marketers don't care about profitability because it's us just driving traffic. At the end of the day, it's the revenue number that you're chasing. But like, if you factor in your cost of marketing, and then you're looking at a profitability, and you should be looking at, or at least asking the questions that can make you an effective marketer as well, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And like, you may not even have it.
No.
You might not be able to get it,
That's true.
depending on the company, but that you're asking for it, I think, is one of those things that, going to his point about learning, I mean, ask for it, see what happens.
Yeah.
And then people might say, well, why do you need that? And then that's also an opportunity to learn. Like, you sit down with whoever it was, the CFO, let's say, who's got those numbers, and they may say, well, why do you need it? Then you've got to figure out why you need it.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to ask for, but like, to actually be able to explain the rationale behind it can also help you learn and understand how to connect the marketing outcomes with business results.
No, agreed. And I know the idea of vanity metrics, I know we've talked about that probably quite often. I think at the end of the day is just, every organization has their own vanity metrics. I think as marketers, it's our responsibility to call that out and say, this metric specifically, and let's just pick on likes for now. We have to stop reporting on this because that actually provides zero value.
Yeah. You and I both are part of campaigns, V, where we're like, fuck, we got 1 million views.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
I'm like, no, like, we paid for it. Like,
totally.
What did you expect? Like, 2 cents a view. Yeah. That's what we kind of calculated. That's how much budget we needed to get 1 million views. Like,
exactly.
It's not a miracle that we had 1 million.
Yeah. We spent $100,000 to get that. So there you go. Congrats.
Right.
1 million views.
Yeah. So yeah, like we could have got 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, like, but it's the outcome of that you were trying to look for. I'm interested in that CLS too, that he was talking about.
Yeah.
Was it lift study?
Channel lift
study. Yeah.
And a lot of the digital channels do that. Now I would probably stay away from channels that can't provide that for you, because then that's where you run into the duplication in terms of, so then what did your channel actually drive? I want to think, I think it was Facebook that came up. You know what? I could be misrepresenting this, but for some reason in my mind, it's Facebook that came up with CLS first, or maybe it was Google.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I remember, well, I used it on Facebook first.
Me too.
Or a version of it. And then I used it later for Google. I remember Google had changed the platform a little while back in terms of how you execute on some of these studies. And so it used to be like a minimum spend threshold.
Yeah.
And then eventually it got to a point where you could buy just a single question study.
Yeah.
Like lift study.
Yeah.
And then it was at a lower price point. The cost for that was a lower price point. You could add it on, whereas it used to just be based on your spend.
Yeah.
But there's still a minimum media weight that I think there was an expectation you spent.
Well, the idea is technically, if you have the luxury of extra budget, that's step one, is look at the channels that you use and try to conduct some CLS in that and allocate some of that extra budget that you have, that 5%, like Avanish suggested, and he suggested 10% of play money, wasn't it? I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's allocated to some of those channel lift studies. So it kind of gives you a more holistic understanding of the incrementality coming from your channel silos, right? And take that first step and seeing, okay, well, you know what? I'm seeing that, every time I do something on Facebook, I'm getting an incremental value of 5%. Okay.
Totally.
Noted.
Yeah. But to your point too, like the 5-10%, whatever the number is, like I think there is also, like, you may not be able to measure things exactly, but that's also the freedom you're giving yourself when you say, like, there's this new channel, let's say, TikTok for now, or voice search was the thing a while back, or maybe the metaverse, or I don't know, maybe print is unique for you.
Doesn't
who
matter,
knows? Yeah. Like, whatever the channel is, like, there's some amount of that I think is interesting because it gives you freedom to experiment, try things out.
Exactly.
Add mediums into your mix that you wouldn't have ever tried before, and be more creative potentially than you ever were before.
Exactly.
It's cool. I like that idea about having a internal skunk works in a way.
Yeah. He referenced it as more as like giving marketers an opportunity to kind of spread their wings. And you want to talk about brand marketers, you want to talk about performance marketers, doesn't matter. We all naturally are curious. So there's things that we could constantly be doing differently in our day-to-day operation. So giving that additional budget will really help us marketers stretch ourselves, right? And I think that's important. But obviously, this large organizations probably have more flexibility here to do something like that than maybe larger than smaller ones, where you're fighting for budget because it's like is directly impacting their ability to keep the doors open. So I can appreciate that, but it's I don't know. It was just a real great, healthy conversation today, and I genuinely, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of ground when you think about it. Like, I'm just looking at my notes here. But funnel metrics we were talking about.
Oh, yeah. Hates the funnel. Great. So do we.
It's funny too. Like, I think there's some amount of that, honestly, where it's people have done it that way. And so it is familiar across an industry. It's a benchmark.
Yeah.
It's a common framework, so people can have a conversation that is familiar, whether you're in sales or marketing or finance or CEO or whoever. You say the funnel and they're like, hey, I get it. You know what I mean? So I think there's some amount of that. if you're looking at changing a funnel, you could either there's a whole bunch of ways you could change that perception of why are we doing it and all that kind of stuff. Maybe part of it is also showing like the outcome, like the acquisition behavior outcome model.
Yeah.
In parallel to that, you can soft sell it that way, just to say, here's a different model.
Here you go. Yeah.
Here's why I think this is better. I'm going to track both for a period of time.
Yeah.
And then eventually work into the one that is more productive for us in managing the media.
Who was our guest that was talking about the fun? Was like, oh, look, I am walking through conversion now.
Yeah, Jenny.
Was it? Oh, it was
going through a hallway.
Yeah.
Jenny Romanek going through the hallway. Oh, there's the awareness door. No, I'm going to go past that one. I'm into consideration. I'm going to see where the consideration door is in the hallway. Yeah.
That's what was when he was talking about funnel. That's where my mind went. It's like,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. It was such a good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, Avanish, if you're hearing the post pod here, thank you once again. It was an incredible conversation. We really appreciated the time, and I know our listeners will get a lot out of this.
Yeah. Okay, V.
All right, my friend.
Adieu. Take it easy.
Adieu.